Morning, everybody. This is Dion again with Inside Sales by Design. Thank you again for visiting our video blog. Today we're going to talk about the number one pet peeve and the fact that words matter. I don't know about you, but when I go and I talk to somebody, I don't care what level they're at, whenever I hear well, isn't it obvious? Well, obviously I won't be doing that. You guys, I've worked really hard to try to become more of a tolerant person, right? And to let people express themselves the way they need to express themselves. In sales, our words matter probably more than in almost any other scenario. Words matter in every scenario, right? When we're trying to persuade, to get a point across, and I say sales not from a standpoint if that's your functional title. I think if you're in HR and you're trying to sell a new benefits program, I think if you are a recruiter trying to sell a position, let's think about sales from a more holistic term and from a perspective of persuasion. That's really in a nutshell what sales is how do we have a dialogue, and how do we have a dialogue about persuasion that says, if you, Mr. or Miss Prospect, whoever's on the receiving end, find value in X, let me share with you why I think you might find value in our Y that can complement your X. Does that make sense? It's a little abstract. I know it's a day after a holiday. So I think too that when I say the word obvious is my number one pet peeve, it truly is. Like there's very rarely things that make the hair on the back of my neck stand up anymore. I don't necessarily react to those things. If you recall our previous post on react versus a response, like my kid can kick me, I can get called names by somebody, doesn't faze me. For whatever reason though, well, obviously I won't be doing that. Or isn't it obvious? If it was obvious, I would not have asked. So when we communicate with people, here's why I think I don't like the word obvious. 2 reasons. Number 1, it's literally 2 letters away from the word oblivious. And when I use the word obvious, I am oblivious to its impact on the other person. Let me say that again. When I use the word obvious, I am potentially oblivious to the impact that word has on the person hearing it, right? So do a study, right? In your communication with somebody that you know and trust, use that word and really watch their body language. Does the light in their eyes dim just a little bit? Does that go down, right? Do they does their body position change at all, right? And so for me, I find that term just dismissive. And maybe I need to change how I'm looking at it. I simply think that if we were to say, instead of, well, isn't it obvious? Maybe again, if we kind of go back to our react versus respond post, if somebody asks me something and I go, wow, of course, man, that's an interesting question, right? And maybe that's just me when I hear that word. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you all think. But I think being able to have a little bit more grace and be a little bit more gracious in our response. And instead, when somebody asks us a question, if we go, well, of course, right? So maybe we go, gosh, that's a really good question. Let me see if I can answer that for you, right? Let me give you an example. Again, it's a kid example, right? My husband and I we both work, we're both kind of moving and grooving. Our daughter's in gymnastics. And so we have a really, really great family friend who is a sitter of ours. Her and her sister we've known each other now for 4 years. And so she's going to go and she's going to take our daughter and she's going to get her from gymnastics. And I go over all the you're going to walk with our little guy and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. It's literally right across the street. And she goes, oh, okay. What time does class end? And I went, oh my goodness. Because it's obvious to me, I am on autopilot when it comes to my family's schedule. I am on autopilot when it comes to certain things that I do when I would set up an inside sales team. So if my response to her had been, well, isn't it obvious they get out at 7:30? Well, no, that's not obvious. That's why she asked. And I didn't communicate that. I communicated everything else except this key detail of when class was ending. So, you guys, in summation, that's why the word obvious makes me crazy. Because we are oblivious to the fact that we have missed the obvious facts that we need to communicate in order to get a point across, or for somebody to carry out a task or a duty that they've either volunteered for or they've been delegated. So at the end of the day, that's the number one pet peeve I have, partially because I think it's the easiest one for us to correct and it's the easiest trap for us to fall into. We've all done it. I've done it, right? So if we go back to our react versus respond, and we come at it from a standpoint of, I need to very clearly communicate and state all the obvious facts in order for this person to be successful. Whether it's our family friend, whether it's our clients, whether it's our boss, whether it's folks that we work with, whether it's our spouse, right? You guys, this is a very ubiquitous concept. And I encourage all of us to try to do two things. One, if we get kind of pushed and go, well, gosh, isn't it obvious? I think we need to look at ourselves and go, again, what's that self-assessment that we're doing that says, maybe it's not so obvious. I'm not necessarily communicating the right way. So number one is there something that we can do potentially differently? And number two is words matter. So are we using words in such a way that is authentic to us and gets our point across? So I encourage you, thank you again for visiting with us. I encourage you to sit down, take an inventory of you and your words and what are some of your speech patterns? What does that look like for you? Do you sometimes give direction to folks and it's not necessarily clear and they come back and they either haven't done it or they have questions, right? So sometimes we want to start with us as leaders and just people that are out in the world, right? Have we communicated clearly and stated all the obvious components, right? And then secondly from that is, pick one thing a week that you're going to work on as a leader to try to focus on and get better at. Right? Is it delegation? You guys, that's hard for me. I don't know about you. Or is it, look at your calendar for the week and go, you know what, this particular meeting I was struggling with, or this particular group of folks I was struggling with, or this particular group of whatever. And sit down and go, okay, have I been using the right words? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. And if the answer is yes, then we need to go into questioning mode and go, okay, I need to really calmly approach the situation and ask HR, sales, marketing, recruiting, whomever, what's the disconnect, right? If, however, we look at this particular scenario and go, gosh, you know what, I have not been communicating. I was thinking that what's in my head was obvious to everybody else, and it's not. I need to do a better job of painting the vision that I have in my head for this partnership I need to have with recruiting to recruit salespeople, for example. So I hope that's some good food for thought for everybody. Stay tuned. We've got some great episodes up and coming. We're going to talk about the number one thing that leaders must provide for their team. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. It's a short week with lots to do, 5 days of work within 4. And we're rapidly approaching crunch time before the holidays hit. So have a great week, and we'll chat with you soon. Thanks so much for visiting.